The engine of my Ford Escape had been cooling for hours, just like me. Chicago was sleeping, or at least pretending to, wrapped in that false tranquility of 5 in the morning. But in the driver's seat of my car, there was no room for sleep, only for the cold. A cold that had settled into my bones as I watched through the windshield the lights of room 314 at the Palmer House Hotel turn on, dim, and finally go out. They had walked in together. Him, David, my husband of 7 years, wearing that navy blue sport coat I bought him last September. Her, a tall silhouette with dark hair pulled back, wearing a striking red dress that screamed in the shadows of the parking garage. They were laughing. He opened the door for her with that gentlemanly gesture he always used with important clients, a gesture I foolishly believed he reserved only for me. They did not kiss at the entrance. That would have been too vulgar, too obvious for a man like David. They only exchanged an intimate, knowing look before disappearing behind the revolving doors. That was the moment the world, my world, split in two with a deafening silence. My phone, glued to my sweaty palm, buzzed softly just as the first fingers of pink light scratched the sky above the Willis Tower in the distance. A text from him. David. Honey, I am so sorry. It is going to be one of those nights. This damn year-end tax close for the Whitmore account has me tied to the office. Do not wait up for dinner. I will call you in the morning. Kisses. I read the text once, twice, 3 times. The words danced on the screen. Well-polished, professional lies, worthy of the successful lawyer he had become. Tied to the office, right? Only the office had a king-size bed and a view of Michigan Avenue. The coldness I had been accumulating all night, layer by layer, like ice on a window pane, suddenly became solid, sharp, useful. It was no longer a weight. It was a weapon. My numb fingers moved with robotic precision. I am coming down. We are going to sign the divorce papers. The response was almost immediate. A phone call that I rejected without blinking. Then another text. David. What? There you go with the drama again. Eleanor, you are joking, right? I am up to my neck in work. I am not joking. Come down now. I am in the parking garage. There was a long, eternal pause. The screen showed David as typing several times, as if he were searching for the right words to disarm a bomb whose fuse had already burned down to the end. Finally, a simple text. David. Where? I did not answer. I turned off the screen and stepped out of the car. The morning air smelled of freshly brewed coffee from the corner cafe and gasoline. I leaned against the hood, crossing my arms. I was not trembling. It surprised me. I waited. The minutes dragged on. Then the revolving door began to move and he walked out. He was just wearing the same clothes from last night, now wrinkled. His hair, always perfectly styled, was messy. He searched with his gaze, confused, until his eyes locked onto me. I saw the color drain from his face. It was an instant physical reaction. His mask of a confident lawyer, of an in-control husband, cracked for a second, exposing pure panic. He walked toward me, slowly at first, then faster. He tried to put together a smile, a crooked, nervous smile. Eleanor, my God, what are you doing here? His voice sounded rough, sleepy, fake. He stepped closer as if to hug me, but my posture, my crossed arms acting like a barrier, stopped him dead in his tracks. What is wrong? You followed me. This is not what it looks like, I swear, he mumbled, lowering his voice. His eyes darted from my eyes to my car, to the hotel windows, to anywhere but my soul. Oh, really? I said. My voice sounded strange to me, calm, as if it belonged to another woman, a much stronger woman. I pulled the phone from my pocket. I did not open the text messages. I opened the photo gallery. The first was from last night, the two of them walking into the hotel, his hand on her lower back, a possessive, intimate gesture. The second, taken 3 days ago by the private investigator I had hired, David and Chloe, that same woman in red, laughing on a rooftop patio in River North, sharing a bottle of white wine, his hand resting over hers. I swiped the image. There were more, but the first was enough. I shoved the screen closer to his face. I saw his eyes dilate, how he swallowed hard. His entire repertoire of excuses vanished into the cold morning air. And this is not what it looks like either, David. Just another client. The daughter of your best partner, perhaps. Chloe Mitchell, 28 years old. A recent hire in the tax department. Very hardworking, from what I am told. Eleanor, listen to me. His voice was now a pleading rasp. He tried to grab my arm. but I pulled my hand away as if his touch burned me. No, you listen to me. I have spent the entire night here. I watched the light in your room turn off. I read your pathetic lie about work. I stopped listening to you years ago. I just did not want to realize it. I took a deep breath. The air hurt my chest. The papers are ready. My lawyer, Miss Vance, yes, the one you recommended for the Homeowners Association dispute, has them all prepared. Your copy will be at the office at 10. I will be there at 11. With any luck, by then you will have had time to shower and invent a better excuse to tell your mother why your marriage has gone to hell. You cannot do this. He exploded, and his fear turned to anger. That anger of a cornered man who thought he had control. This is crazy. Over something stupid. She is just a girl. It means nothing. It is just work stuff. Work stuff, I repeated. And for the first time, I felt the rage. A pure and righteous rage, beginning to melt the ice in my veins. Sleeping with your main partner's daughter is work stuff. Using our money, the money for our future, to pay for her apartment and jewelry is work stuff. Please, David, do me a favor and do not treat me like an idiot right up to the bitter end. My voice, louder than I intended, echoed in the silence of the parking garage. A valet walking out of the hotel shot us a curious glance. David shrank, humiliated. How? How do you know about the apartment? He asked, bewildered, his anger deflating instantly. A cold smile formed on my lips. It was the first time I felt powerful in months, in years. Because I am no longer the naive Eleanor you met. The one who believed coming home late was because of the traffic. The one who thought those business trips to Scottsdale were just to play golf with clients. That woman froze to death in this seat last night. The one who is left, I said, opening the car door. The one who is left has been doing her homework. I got into the car and closed the door. He stood there, planted, pale, disheveled, watching as the perfect life he had built upon a mountain of lies crumbled at his feet. I started the engine, a healthy, determined sound that cut through the tense silence between us. I rolled down the window just a few inches. His eyes, full of genuine fear now, met mine. At 11, David, at the office. Do not be late. You know how much I hate it when people waste my time. And before he could articulate another lie, another plea, another attempt at manipulation, I released the brake and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched him grow smaller and smaller, alone under the cold light of the Chicago dawn, still holding his phone, the evidence of his ruin glowing uselessly on the now dark screen. I did not cry. Instead, I turned on the radio. An old Madonna song was playing, ironically, upbeat. I turned it up and, for the first time in an endless night, I breathed. It was not a sigh of relief. It was the first sharp, painful gasp of someone who has just broken the surface after nearly drowning. The battle, I knew, was only just beginning. But last night, in the suffocating stillness of that parking garage, I had fought the first and most important skirmish. I had found myself again 3 months earlier. The breeze coming through the large window of our penthouse in Lincoln Park still carried a last sigh of summer, but the light was no longer the same. It was a lower, more golden light that announced autumn. I, Eleanor, was leaning against the doorframe, watching as the afternoon tinted the historic facades of the next block in amber. In my hand, a glass of white wine that was no longer cold. Behind me echoed the silence of an apartment that was too big, too quiet. This week is going to be hell, honey, David said, walking out of the bedroom. He was wearing the light blue shirt that looked best on him, the one I had ironed myself that morning. He adjusted his tie knot in front of the hallway mirror, with that quick, expert gesture he had perfected over years of appearing before judges and wealthy clients. The Whitmore case is about to blow up. Late meetings, business dinners, do not wait up for me. It was the third time he had said it that week, and it was only Tuesday. I turned toward him, resting my hip against the windowsill. Another dinner with the same client. It seems, Mr. Whitmore likes our company more than his wife's, David laughed. A hollow sound. Professional. He is a big fish, Eleanor. A big fish with a messy divorce and an investment portfolio spanning half the Cayman Islands. This kind of attention is our daily bread. He walked over, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. His cologne, woodsy and expensive, enveloped me. For months, that scent had stopped giving me the butterflies it used to. Now it only reminded me of hotel lobbies and invoices I never saw. You know how this is. I know, I said. And it was true. I knew the theory. 7 years of marriage to a rising lawyer at a prestigious firm on the Magnificent Mile teaches you the theory. What I did not know was why the practice was making my stomach tie in knots more and more. "What about your dinner with Sarah?" he asked, picking up his leather briefcase, the one his partners gifted him when he made partner. "Cancelled. She has to stay late at the gallery, setting up the new exhibition. A shame. Order something good for yourself on my tab." He opened the door. "I do not know what time I will be home. Do not stay awake." The door clicked shut softly. Silence reclaimed the apartment. I finished the warm, sour wine. Business dinners. At first, when he was just an associate, they were cold pizzas in the office. Then they turned into Michelin-starred restaurants. Lately, they had mutated into vague events and informal meetings with no set schedule. I had been understanding, even proud. My husband, the brilliant David Miller, climbing the ladder of success with determination. Until one day, looking up at that ladder from the bottom, I realized I was no longer by his side. I had been left on a landing, holding the coat he had taken off so he could climb lighter. A week later was the wedding of my younger sister Claire, a celebration at a renovated barn venue in Galena. Golden vineyards, long tables, laughter, and the sound of a live jazz band. David was impeccable, as always. The perfect suit, the dances with my mother, the appropriate jokes with my uncles, the perfect husband. But I, having learned to read the slightest gestures on his face over 7 years, saw the tension in his smile. I saw how his gaze drifted every few minutes, how he checked his wristwatch discreetly but constantly. "Your better half seems in a hurry to squeeze the life out of this party," muttered Sarah, my older sister, stepping up beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. Her gaze, as sharp as a hawk's, followed the direction of mine. David was across the courtyard talking to my father, but his posture was rigid, distant. "The Whitmore case," I answered automatically. It was the wild card, the universal excuse. Sarah took a sip of her champagne. "That case must have more tentacles than an octopus. He has been tangled up in it since spring." She looked at me out of the corner of her eye. "Are you two doing okay?" "Of course. Why wouldn't we be?" "I do not know. Because he seems more interested in his phone than in your sister's dress. And because you are wearing a smile that reminds me of Mom's the day the dog decided to eat Grandma's rosary. Painted on." Before I could answer, David walked over. "Honey, I am sorry," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. His touch gave me an involuntary shiver. "I have to go. Whitmore needs to sign some documents tonight. It is crazy, but it is our daily bread." I finished for him with a sweetness that surprised even me. He blinked, slightly unnerved. "Exactly. I am sorry." He kissed my cheek. "Give Claire a hug for me. Next dinner is on me." And just like that, in the middle of my sister's party, he vanished. I watched him walk away between the tables, waving with one hand, the other already pulling his phone from his pocket. Later, in the early hours of the morning, Sarah drove me home in her car. David had taken his own. When I walked into the garage, his black Audi gleamed under the fluorescent lights. I walked over without really knowing why, maybe to feel the residual heat of the engine, tangible proof that he had been there, that his rush had been real. The driver's door was not locked. David, always so meticulous, must have been distracted. Inside, the smell of his cologne was even stronger. On the passenger seat, half hidden under the vehicle manual, I saw a small rectangular piece of paper. I picked it up. It was a receipt from the bar at the Ritz-Carlton. 2 coffees, a mineral water, and a club sandwich. Date: the previous night. Time: 10:47 p.m. Paid by credit card, David's. I stood frozen, holding that piece of paper that suddenly weighed a ton. There could be 1,000 explanations. A last-minute meeting near the hotel. An out-of-town client. But something, a deep and icy instinct, whispered to me that none of those explanations were the truth. The Ritz-Carlton was not near his office. And at 11 at night, a club sandwich for 2 was not a business dinner. It was a late-night snack for someone who had other intentions. I put the receipt in my purse. I did not cry. I just went up to our silent penthouse. And that night, for the first time, I slept in the guest room. The following days were an exercise in morbid observation. I started noticing things. The smell of a sweet, foreign, faint perfume on the jacket he sometimes left hanging on a chair. His exaggerated reaction when one night, while we were watching a show, his phone rang, and he snapped it shut, saying it was an annoying client. The way he had started changing the password on his laptop after years of using the same one, our wedding date. The final blow came from where I least expected it, from a college friend, Paige, who worked at a consulting firm. We met for mimosas on a patio in Wicker Park. After talking about work, mutual friends, life, she toyed with the garnish on her glass and said with a feigned casualness that did not fool me, "Hey, I saw you the other day. Or rather, I saw David." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, yeah, where?" "At that trendy new spot in River North, the one with the rooftop over the city." He was with a group from the firm, I think, and with a tall, brunette girl dressed in red. They looked like they were having a really good time. She looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the same concern Sarah had shown at the wedding. "I do not know. They seemed close. But anyway, I am sure it was a work thing, right? I am sure it was a work thing. The same phrase, the same mantra." I nodded with a dry throat. "Yeah, sure. Those team dinners." But in my head, the pieces were beginning to fit together in a way that terrified me. The hotel receipt, the late nights out, the perfume, the girl in red, and a name I had heard David mention on rare occasions. Always with a special tone. Professional, but interested. Chloe Mitchell. That night, while David snored softly beside me, having come home at a reasonable hour smelling of pasta and red wine, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The doubt, that silent snake, no longer just nested in my stomach. It had coiled around my heart and was squeezing tight. It was no longer enough to observe. It was no longer enough to wait for the lie to crumble on its own. The naive Eleanor, the one who believed in business dinners, had been left behind somewhere between the Ritz-Carlton receipt and Paige's pitying look. Something broke inside me. A resignation, perhaps. Or maybe it was the opposite. The last vestige of resignation shattering into pieces. The coldness I would feel months later in the hotel parking garage began to form then, that night, in the bed I shared with a man who felt more like a stranger every day. The next day, after listening to David leave the house with another working late, my love, I did not stay looking out the window. I went to my computer, opened the browser, and with fingers that trembled slightly, but with a newly forged steel determination, I typed the words, "Private Investigators, Chicago." Sunday smelled of rosemary and guilt. The aroma of the Sunday pot roast my mother was taking out of the oven in the kitchen of her Winnetka house, mixed with the familiar scent of the oak trees, and something denser, heavier, the silent expectation that had blanketed the meal since I arrived alone. "David is working again on a Sunday," I had said upon entering, kissing the cheek of my mother, who smelled of lavender soap and worry. That endless case. My mother, Mary, nodded with tight lips, an expression I knew all too well. It was her way of saying, "I do not believe a word of it, but I am not going to push for now." My father, Edward, from his reading chair, only looked up over his glasses and grunted, "That boy works like a mule. Someday he will have the money to buy his own island, but he will not have the time to step foot on it." It was my sister, Sarah, already sitting at the patio table with a glass of red wine, who shot me the look that said everything. A look that said, "I hope you are okay, and we need to talk. And if that jerk has done something to you, I will tear him apart." The meal passed with the usual cacophony of an American family on a Sunday. My younger brother Paul's kids were running around the table. My sister-in-law, Anna, talked non-stop about the homeowners association problems. My father pontificated about politics. My mother served generous portions, as if the roast could cover up any awkward silence. But the tension floated in the air, more tangible than the steam from the gravy. It was during dessert, a cherry pie my mother brought from the counter, when the bomb dropped, albeit in the most subtle way. "Hey, Eleanor," my mother said, wiping her hands on her apron. "The other day I ran into Linda, the mother of David's friend. What is his name?" "Mark. Anyway, Linda at Nordstrom. She told me she had seen David a couple of weeks ago, on a Saturday afternoon, at the Music Box Theater with some friends. She left the sentence hanging in the air like a dirty tray nobody wants to pick up. Everyone, even the kids, seemed to quiet down for a moment. Sarah dropped her spoon onto her plate with a sharp click. "Oh, really?" I asked, tasting a bite of the warm pie that suddenly tasted like ashes. "He did not mention it to me." "With what friends?" "She did not tell me that," my mother replied, avoiding my gaze as she cleared plates. "She just mentioned he was with a group of young people. I thought maybe you guys were organizing something and forgot to invite us old folks." Her laugh sounded forced, grating. "David has a lot of obligations, Mom," I said, and my voice sounded too cold, too controlled. "From work. You know how it is." Right. My father jumped in, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Work comes first. As it should. Pour some more wine. Edward, come on. But my mother was not willing to let the opportunity pass. As she helped Anna carry the plates to the kitchen, she said in a tone that pretended to be light, but was anything but. Eleanor, honey, come help me with the coffee. You make it better than I do. It was a trap, and I, like an idiot, got up and followed her. In the kitchen, with the hum of the coffee maker as the only witness, the disguise fell away. My mother leaned against the marble counter, crossed her arms, and looked directly at me. What is going on, daughter? Nothing, Mom. I already told you. Do not lie to me. You have been walking around looking like you are at a funeral for weeks, and today you showed up alone again. Is it this Chloe girl Sarah told me about? I mentally cursed my sister, though I knew her intentions were good. Sarah should mind her own business. Sarah looks out for you. That is what a sister does. And I am your mother. Now tell me who this woman is. The exhaustion, the contained rage, the suspicion that had been eating me inside for weeks. Everything exploded in a harsh whisper. She is the daughter of James Mitchell, David's senior partner, the new addition to the firm. She is 28 years old, and apparently she likes the movies and expensive hotels. My mother's face went pale. She did not seem surprised, but resigned, as if she had been waiting for this news, dreading it, but knowing it would come. Oh, Eleanor, she whispered, and suddenly she looked all of her 65 years. These men, always the same. No, Mom, not all men are the same. And this is not just some foolish man thing. This is my husband lying to me, going out with someone else, making a fool out of me. Are you sure? She asked, and in her voice, there was a trace of pathetic hope. It could be a misunderstanding. Sometimes young women are very friendly and men get ideas. I am not stupid. I snapped, and my voice rose in volume, making Anna, who was walking in at that moment with more plates, jump and quickly back away. I have proof. Well, almost. I am trying to make sure. My mother stepped closer, placing her wrinkled hands over mine, which were gripping the edge of the counter like a life preserver. Listen to me, daughter. Even if it were true, these things happen. They happen more often than you think. Your father? She paused, swallowing hard. Well, that does not matter. Right now, what matters is the family, what you have built. 7 years, Eleanor. A beautiful apartment, an enviable life. Are you going to throw it all overboard for a little fling? I looked at her in disbelief, not because of what she was saying, but because of the deep, ancient pain that showed in her eyes. Suddenly, a lot of things from my childhood made bitter sense. The silenced arguments, my father's sudden absences, the sadness that sometimes wrapped around my mother like a shawl. Dad? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She looked away. It was a long time ago. A secretary, a foolish mistake, but I endured it for you kids, for this house, for the family. And look, here we are, together. Your father is a good man. In the end, everyone has their weaknesses. I felt a wave of nausea, not disgust toward her, but panic. That was my future. To wait, to lower my head, to become this strong, broken woman looking at me with pleading eyes. I am not you, Mom, I said. And my voice trembled, but it did not give. I am not going to endure it. I am not going to pretend nothing is happening while my husband sleeps with someone else. I am not going to keep up appearances so the neighbors will not talk. It is your life you are going to destroy. Her voice broke too, but with anger. Do you know what it is to be a divorced woman at your age? Moving back to your parents' house. The pitying looks, finances in a mess, and if you want to have children, time is running out. Every word was a knife, but every knife, instead of weakening me, was sharpening me. I prefer the pity of others to despising myself, I said, pulling my hands away from hers. And I am not going to move back to this house. I have my job, I have my savings, I have Sarah. Sarah, my mother exclaimed, as if my sister's name were an insult. Of course, your sister, the feminist, the one who lives with her girlfriend and paints pictures nobody buys. She is going to give you advice on marriage. Of course she is. A woman who has not figured out how to keep a man by her side, nor, the kitchen door swung open. Sarah stood there, fists clenched and eyes blazing with fury. She had heard everything. A woman does not have to keep a man by her side, Mom. Like he is a dog or a houseplant, she said with a calmness more terrifying than any scream. And for your information, Emma and I have been together for 12 years, longer than a lot of marriages we know, and we do not cheat on each other. It seems that is more than can be said for this household. My mother turned pale. Do not speak like that. This is my house, and Eleanor is your sister and she is suffering, and instead of supporting her, you are telling her to shut up and take it like you did. Well, no, she is not you. She has more courage. The sound of a plate breaking on the patio floor startled all three of us. It was my father. He had peered into the kitchen, and on his face, usually so serene, there was a mix of shame and suppressed rage. You are talking about things that are none of your business, he roared, addressing my mother. Leave her alone, Mary. Eleanor is an adult. Let her do what she needs to do. And what would you know? My mother snapped at him, turning to him with a fury she must have been accumulating for decades. You who were never around. You who, enough. My voice cut through the air like broken glass. Everyone fell silent and looked at me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the air loaded with family resentment, old secrets, and inherited lies. Enough, I repeated, softer. This is not your fight. It is mine. Mom, I love you, but I am not going to live my life the way you lived yours. Dad, I have no words for you right now. Sarah, thank you. I grabbed my purse from the coat rack. My hands were shaking, but my voice was firm. I am leaving, and I am not going to talk about this with you again until I decide how and when. David and I have things to sort out, and we are going to sort them out. Without family committees, without unsolicited advice, and without Sunday dinners covering up the problems. I walked toward the door. Nobody tried to stop me. At the threshold, I turned back. My mother was crying silently. My father stared at the floor, defeated. Only Sarah held my gaze, and in her eyes I saw a fierce pride, an absolute solidarity. One more thing, Mom, I said. It is not a little fling. It is the end of my marriage, and I am going to be the one who decides how it ends. I walked out into the hallway, then out to the street, lit by the Sunday afternoon. The air was sweet, clean. It no longer smelled of rosemary or guilt. It smelled of freedom. A terrifying, painful freedom, but freedom nonetheless. In my purse, my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. Finishing up soon? Let us grab dinner. I miss you. I looked at the screen, at that bright, easy lie, and for the first time, I did not feel pain. I did not feel rage. I felt clarity. I did not reply. I put the phone away, got into my car, and before starting the engine, I pulled out my planner. I looked for the number I had written down days earlier, after my online research, the number of the private investigator recommended by a friend from law school, one who specialized in messy divorces. I looked at the name. Mike Roberts. Discreet investigations. Without allowing time for doubt or the ghost of my mother's resignation to dissuade me, I dialed the number. It rang twice before a deep, professional voice answered on the other end. Talk to me. Good afternoon, I said, and my voice sounded strangely serene in the quiet of the car. This is Eleanor Miller. I need your services. Mike Roberts' office smelled of cheap coffee and vanilla-flavored vape smoke. It was not in the glamorous part of Chicago, but in a 1970s building on the near west side, close to the United Center. The waiting room was small, with a laminate table and outdated car magazines. Nothing to do with the sleek glass and steel offices of David's firm. Mrs. Miller, come in, said the receptionist, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses hanging from a lanyard. Mike Roberts looked nothing like the detectives in the movies. He was a man in his 50s, balding, with a slight belly that strained the buttons of his plaid shirt. He had a brown corduroy jacket hanging over the back of his chair. His handshake was firm, dry. Have a seat, please. He pointed to the chair across from his desk, cluttered with folders and a laptop from several years ago. On the phone, you said this was a matrimonial surveillance matter. Yes. I nodded, placing my purse on my lap like a shield. Now that I was there, in that place that confirmed my marriage needed a spy, reality hit me with all its harshness. I swallowed hard. I believe my husband is being unfaithful. I need proof. Roberts nodded without showing surprise or judgment. His expression was professional, neutral. He opened a notebook. I understand. It is a difficult situation. Tell me, what makes you suspicious? And so, with a voice that trembled at first, but grew steadier as I spoke, I told him everything. The endless business dinners, the Ritz-Carlton receipt, the foreign perfume, the girl in red, the name, Chloe Mitchell, the senior partner's daughter. Roberts took notes in small, quick handwriting. Do you have a picture of your husband? And of Miss Mitchell? If you have one. I handed him my phone. I had a recent photo of David from a family dinner. For Chloe, I only found a LinkedIn profile picture I had screenshotted. It was a professional headshot, a brunette, attractive woman with a confident, almost defiant smile. Robert studied it. I know her, or rather, I know of her. Her father, James Mitchell, is a big fish. He has interests all over Chicago. He looked at me. This could complicate things. People with power are usually careful. I do not want trouble. I just want the truth. The truth has a price, Mrs. Miller. And sometimes that price is not just financial. He put down his pen. My rates are these. He slid a printed brochure toward me. Basic surveillance, weekly reports, photographic or video evidence, if possible and legal, very discreet. You sign an NDA, I deliver results. If we tap computers or phones, that is another, more expensive service with its own legal risks. I do not recommend it as a first step. I read the numbers. They were substantial, but not prohibitive. I could afford it with my savings, with the portion of the joint account I managed. Money I had planned to use to remodel the kitchen, I would now use to dynamite the foundations of my marriage. All right, just surveillance for now. I signed the paperwork he placed in front of me with handwriting I hoped looked firm. I want to know where he goes, who he is with, how much time he spends with her, everything. You will receive a first report in 48 hours. He stood up, signaling the end of the interview. One piece of advice. Mrs. Miller. While the investigation is ongoing, act normally. No questions. No snooping. No scenes. Be cold. Be smart. People with something to hide get careless when they think nobody is watching. I walked out of there, feeling dirty and powerful at the same time. I had crossed a threshold. I was no longer just the suspicious wife. I was the client paying for the truth. The next 2 weeks were an exercise in continuous acting. I smiled at David in the mornings. I asked him about his day, about the Whitmore case. I nodded as he told me his increasingly elaborate lies. A dinner with Japanese clients at Alinea, a team-building weekend with the firm up in Lake Geneva. I mentally took note of every detail, every contradiction, and then compared them with the brief, devastating reports that started arriving at a secure email address I had created just for this. Subject, David Miller. Day 1, Thursday. Leaves the firm at 7:45 p.m. Takes a taxi to Alinea restaurant. Meets Miss Chloe Mitchell, 28 years old, driver's license attached. At 8:15 p.m. Dinner of approximately 2 hours. Observable behavior, frequent physical closeness, laughing, touching hands at the table. They leave together at 10:30 p.m. Take a taxi heading toward the Gold Coast district. They get off at Astor Street. Enter an apartment building. Subject leaves alone at 12:47 a.m. Takes a taxi to family residence. 12 photographs attached. The images were grainy, taken with a telephoto lens from far away, but unmistakable. David smiling, leaning toward her, in an intimate gesture he had not used with me in years. Her laughing, touching his arm. The Astor Street address. A quick internet search confirmed it was a luxury building with rental apartments. Their love nest, or maybe the apartment he was paying for her. The second report was even more damning. Day 6, Tuesday. Subject leaves work at 6:00 p.m. Drives his personal vehicle, an Audi A6, license plate XYZ, to the Oakbrook Center Mall. Meets Miss Mitchell in the underground parking garage. She enters the vehicle. They remain inside for 25 minutes. Afterward, they head to the Palmer House Hotel. They enter separately, 5 minutes apart. Subject leaves at 10:15 p.m. Alone. 8 photographs and a short video clip without audio of the hotel entrance attached. The short, shaky video was the hardest blow. Seeing him, my husband, walking into that hotel with that furtive determination was like taking a punch to the gut. There was no longer any room for doubt or hope. The truth was that cold, irrefutable sequence of pixels. Mike Roberts called me at the third report. Mrs. Miller, I have some additional information that might interest you. We ran a basic financial check, crossing public records. Your husband has been making monthly transfers from a secondary account in his name to a lease agreement under Chloe Mitchell's name. The address is on Astor Street. The apartment has been rented for 7 months. 7 months. Almost a year. It was not a slip-up. It was a double life. There are also records of purchases with his corporate credit card at jewelry stores and boutiques that, based on the amounts and frequency, do not appear intended for you. He continued, his voice neutral on the other end of the line. Do you want us to dig deeper? We can try to access more detailed bank statements. But I would need your written authorization, and it carries more legal risk. No, I said, and my voice sounded strangely serene, as if it were coming from far away. This is enough, more than enough. Send me everything you have, please. And prepare the final invoice. I hung up. I did not need any more. I had the pieces of the puzzle. An ugly, vulgar puzzle that showed the image of a rotten marriage. That same afternoon, knowing David would be in late meetings, I made 2 calls. The first was to the office of Valerie Vance, the family lawyer. The same one David had furiously recommended to me the year before when I had issues with a neighbor. She is a tiger, he had said. The best for messy divorces. The irony was so acidic I could almost taste it. Valerie, this is Eleanor Miller. I need to see you. It is urgent, and it is about David. There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, the professional, direct voice of the lawyer, come by tomorrow first thing at 8, through the back door, if you prefer discretion. The second call was to the bank, to my personal banker's direct line. Jason, this is Eleanor Miller. I need you to freeze all joint accounts immediately, the savings and the line of credit. Only keep the personal account in my name active. Yes, it is an order from both account holders. No, my husband is not available at the moment. It is a preventative security measure. I will explain everything in person soon. Yes, right now. Please. I hung up. My hands were not shaking. My heart beat at a rapid, steady rhythm. There was no more fear. There was only a cold, metallic determination. I had moved from suspicion to evidence, and from evidence to action. That night, David came home near midnight. He smelled of night air, and a faint, sweet perfume that was not mine. He faked exhaustion. A disaster, babe. These Japanese clients are relentless. What did you do? I was sitting on the sofa with an open book on my lap. The lights were dim. I looked up and looked at him. I really looked at him. Maybe for the first time in months. I saw the tiny smudge of lipstick, almost imperceptible, on the collar of his white shirt. I saw the slight puffiness under his eyes, not from exhaustion, but from the contained euphoria of someone who had just been with his lover. I saw the stranger who lived in my house. Oh, nothing important, I said, and smiled. It was a calm smile, the smile of someone who has already made an irreversible decision. Just things around the house. The calm I had felt after freezing the accounts and meeting with the lawyer lasted exactly 48 hours. It was a strange, electric calm, like the silence that precedes a storm. I played my role. I made dinner, asked about his day, listened to his increasingly elaborate lies with a perfectly molded plastic smile. It was like living inside a glass bubble, watching the outside world distort, knowing that at any moment it could shatter. The explosion came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding freshly ironed laundry in the bedroom. My phone, tossed on the bed, buzzed with a number I did not recognize. A New York area code. An instinctive shiver ran down my spine before I even swiped the screen to accept the call. Yes. Hello? I said with a neutral voice. Eleanor Miller. The voice on the other end was female, young, self-assured. A refined accent. The kind learned in expensive schools and polished abroad. This is she. Who is calling? This is Chloe Mitchell. The air escaped my lungs. I looked around as if the room, our bedroom, could offer me some kind of refuge. It did not. There were only stacks of David's shirts, his carefully folded pants, the watch I gave him for our last anniversary on the nightstand, a whole life packaged in domestic routines that suddenly seemed grotesque. Chloe Mitchell, I repeated, and I was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. The coldness I had been cultivating like a weapon activated instantly. The daughter of James Mitchell, the new addition to my husband's firm. There was a brief pause, as if she did not expect me to identify her so quickly. Exactly. Look, I know this is highly unusual, but we need to talk. I have nothing to talk to you about, Chloe. It is about David, she said quickly before I could hang up. And about us. There it was. The word us. A tiny word that contained a universe of betrayal. I grabbed it like someone grabbing a knife by the blade, feeling the edge cut me. Us? I asked, letting a thread of ice slip into my tone. You and David form an us. How endearing. That must be complicated with him living here. And you, well, where exactly do you live? In the apartment on Astor Street? The one he pays for, right? The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I could almost hear her swallow hard, composing herself. She was not as confident as she seemed. Did you follow me? She asked, and her voice lost an ounce of that initial confidence. You do not have to follow someone who does not hide, I lied, enjoying her bewilderment. Then I remembered. Suddenly my index finger moved on its own. I tapped the screen, hit the call record button. A small red icon started blinking. Valerie Vance had suggested it. Record everything, even the silences. But tell me, Chloe, what is so urgent that you need to call your lover's wife? I am not his lover, she said, recovering some of her arrogance. We are something more. It is complicated. Oh, right, complicated. Like your dinner at Alinea, or your afternoon at the Music Box Theater, or your stays at the Palmer House. The truth sounds pretty simple to me. This is not a joke, Eleanor. What we have is serious. David and I are in love. The word in love hit me in the solar plexus with the force of a fist, but I did not double over. On the contrary, I straightened up. The folded clothes lay at my feet, ignored. In love, I repeated and let out a dry, cutting laugh. How beautiful. And when did this romance begin? 7 months ago. When he rented the apartment for you? Or earlier, when he snuck you into Daddy's firm to have you closer? He did not sneak me in, she exploded, and for the first time, I heard genuine rage in her voice. I have a master's degree from Harvard. I earned my spot. And how lucky that your father is the senior partner. And what a coincidence that your direct boss is David. And that you need so many private meetings to review contracts. It must be a very demanding job. You are bitter. You cannot keep him by your side if he does not love you anymore. Her tone turned dismissive. Can't you see? He has stayed with you out of pity, out of habit. I give him something you never could. The burning heat of anger rose in my throat, but I held it back. No, I was not going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I lowered my voice, made it almost confidential, sweetly venomous. And what do you give him, Chloe? Youth? A last name that opens doors? Tell me, why is it that when you are in that apartment he pays for, he talks to you about how boring I am, about how grateful he is that you came into his life? Or does he rather talk to you about the mortgage, the boring family obligations, how stressful it is to pretend day after day? She took a deep breath. You have no idea. I have every idea. I have photos. I have receipts. I have bank statements. I have the reports from a private investigator who has been following you two for weeks. I know everything, Chloe. Down to the brand of perfume you wear, to the wine you order at Alinea. I know absolutely everything. The silence this time was different. It was a silence heavy with panic. I could feel it through the line. No, you cannot prove that my husband, using money from our marriage, is maintaining his younger lover, who also happens to be his senior partner's daughter, compromising not only our marriage but possibly the professional ethics of his firm. Of course I can. And I will. He loves me, she said, but her voice sounded weak, like a scolded child. David only loves himself. Chloe, you are an accessory, an expensive and maybe fun one, but an accessory nonetheless. When this blows up, and it is going to blow up, your daddy is not going to be very happy, and David will have to choose. Would you bet he is going to choose me? Before she could answer, I delivered my final blow, the one I had been preparing since I saw her LinkedIn profile, since I knew who she was. By the way, did you know that this weekend, according to his shared calendar, David and I were going to go to Paris to celebrate our anniversary? He has been talking to me about it for weeks. The hotel, the restaurant. He seemed very excited. A lie. There were no plans for Paris. He had not mentioned anniversaries in months. But it was the kind of detail, intimate, cruel, that could pierce the armor of a mistress who believes herself the protagonist of a great love story. There was a gasp, a small, choked sound. Then nothing. He did not mention it to you? I added with fake sweetness. How strange. He must have forgotten, with how busy he is with work and everything else. I hung up. My hands were shaking now from adrenaline, from suppressed rage, from a kind of savage and painful triumph. The recording was saved. I had caught her. I had driven the knife of doubt into her rich girl confidence, but the victory tasted like ashes. Not even 10 minutes had passed when the phone rang again. This time it was David. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, I answered. I said nothing. Eleanor. His voice was tense, agitated. What did you say to Chloe? She just called me, throwing a fit. Hello, honey, I said, with a calmness that must have sounded ghostly to him. How was your day? Lots of work? Do not mess with me. You threatened her. You told her you have her under surveillance. We just had a chat between women. She called me, you know, to tell me how in love you two are. It was very enlightening. I heard him panting on the other end. I pictured him in his office with his tie undone, looking toward the door in fear someone might hear. She is just a kid, Eleanor. She is confused. She took some professional attention the wrong way. It means nothing. 7 months of rent, dinners at 3-star restaurants, and afternoons at the Palmer House are professional attention? Wow, my company has a much tighter client entertainment budget. The silence was absolute. Then a hoarse whisper full of a fear I had never heard in him before. What? What exactly do you know? Everything, David. I know everything. And I have the proof on paper, in digital files, and recorded, like the conversation from a little while ago with your confused kid. Are you crazy? He yelled, but the yell sounded desperate, powerless. You put a detective on me. You are spying on me. Watching you. There is a difference. I was watching my marital assets, which turned out to be invested in an apartment for your mistress, and in jewelry, and in trips. It is amazing the amount of work expenses that lack receipts. Honey, she is my partner's daughter, he shrieked. It is complicated. If her father finds out that there is tension, he could what? Kick you out of the firm? Leave his spoiled little girl without her new toy? I cut him off sharply. I had had enough. Listen to me, and listen to me well. I have frozen all joint accounts. I have hired Valerie Vance. The divorce papers are being drafted at this very moment, and if you do not sign an uncontested divorce and accept the division of assets she proposes, everything I have, including that recording of Chloe admitting to your relationship, will not just end up in court. It will also go straight to the inbox of your dear partner James Mitchell, and the State Bar Association, and your mother, and the newspaper if necessary. No, you cannot do that. His voice was now a threat, a plea. Of course I can. And I will, unless you do exactly as I say. The first thing is that you come home right now, and we are going to have a real conversation. No lies, no crocodile tears. Because the tears, David, ran out months ago. I hung up. I turned off the phone. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor among the piles of folded clothes. My body trembled from top to bottom, as if I had a fever. But inside, in some deep place, there was a core of perfect ice, still and hard. I had said the words, divorce, lawyer, proof. There was no turning back now. The war had begun, and I had just won the first decisive battle. I had stolen the initiative from him. I had stripped away his control. Now he was on the defensive, terrified. And a scared man, I knew very well, is a dangerous man, but he is also a man who makes mistakes. I waited, sitting on the floor of our bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of the life I had built and was about to demolish. I waited for my husband to arrive, the man I had shared 7 years with, and whom, in that moment more than ever, I did not know at all. The law firm, Mitchell, Miller and Associates, occupied 2 entire floors of a modern building on the Magnificent Mile, with views of the spectacular Wrigley Building. It had always seemed ironic to me. So much money, so much prestige, dedicated to solving other people's problems while ours rotted from the inside. Today, walking through those massive glass doors, that irony tasted like bile. The receptionist, a young, elegantly dressed woman, smiled at me professionally. Good morning. You have an appointment with Eleanor Miller. Here to see my husband, David Miller, I said without stopping. My heels clicked with determination across the polished marble of the lobby. I was wearing a simple but impeccable pearl gray pantsuit, my hair pulled back into a severe bun. I was not the disheveled, hurting wife. I was a negotiator walking into a boardroom. Valerie Vance had told me, "Your appearance is your first statement. Let it be of power, not of pain." Mrs. Miller, wait. You cannot just go in. The receptionist stood up, alarmed, but I had already reached the dark wooden doors that led to the executive offices. Relax, Martha, I said, remembering her name from some firm Christmas party. My husband is expecting me. I pushed the doors open. My heart was pounding, but it was a steady beat of pure adrenaline, not of fear. The bullpen, with its designer desks and young lawyers typing frantically, plunged into an uncomfortable silence. Some recognized me and lowered their gaze. Others, the newer ones, watched me with curiosity. David's office was at the end of the hall, his name engraved on a brass plaque. His secretary, Laura, a woman in her 50s who had always seemed nice to me, turned pale when she saw me. "Eleanor, honey, David is in a— I know he is alone." I interrupted her with a smile that did not reach my eyes. I just spoke to him. "Laura, this is none of your business. Please, do not get in the middle." Compassion and conflict reflected on her face. She nodded slowly and looked away. I appreciated her silence. I opened the office door without knocking. David was standing by the window with his back to me, looking at the chaos of the street. Hearing me, he turned around. He looked wrecked. He was wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the morning at the hotel, his tie undone. He had deep bags under his eyes. On his face, a mix of anger, panic, and a shadow of something that might have been remorse. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed, lowering his voice but unable to hide the tremor. "Do you want to ruin me? You have already done that all by yourself," I said, closing the door behind me with a soft, definitive click. I pulled a thick brown envelope from my briefcase and dropped it onto his immaculate oak desk. "The divorce papers, the proposed settlement agreement. Everything is in there, signed by me. Your turn." He looked at the envelope as if it contained a snake. Then he looked toward the door, blindly imagining the attentive ears on the other side. "Eleanor, for the love of God, we can talk about this at home. This is not the place." "This is the perfect place," I said, sweeping my gaze over the shelves full of law books, the framed diplomas, the photo from our wedding that, I noticed now, was no longer in its spot. "This is where you built your lie, where you used your power, your influence, to finance your double life. It seems only fair that it falls apart here." He stepped closer, resting his hands on the desk, leaning toward me. He tried to look intimidating, but he only managed to look desperate. "Listen to me. Chloe is not what you think. She is an unstable girl. She got obsessed with me. I tried to cut it off, but she threatened to go to her father, to tell him I was harassing her. She could destroy my career, Eleanor. I was trapped." A bitter, brief laugh escaped my lips. "Seriously, that is the new version? Because 2 days ago in the parking garage, you told me it was work stuff, and last night that she was a confused kid. Now it turns out she is a psychopath blackmailing you. How convenient, David. Always the victim. Never the bastard who sleeps with his boss's daughter. I do not permit you to— Shut up, I snapped, and my voice, cold and sharp as glass, echoed in the room. He recoiled, surprised. "You do not get to forbid me from doing anything. Not since I saw you walk into that hotel. Now I speak. You have 2 options. You sign these papers, you accept the division of assets my lawyer proposes, which, by the way, is very generous considering we could go the criminal route for embezzlement. And this ends in a civilized manner, or you force me to make all the information I have public. And I do not just mean to the judge, I mean to every single one of your partners, to your clients, to the business press. Prominent family lawyer caught in an embezzlement scandal with his partner's daughter. Has a nice ring to it, right?" The office door swung open. James Mitchell, the senior partner, the father of Chloe, a man in his 60s with the bearing of an old bullfighter and the gaze of a hawk, filled the doorframe. Beside him, pale as wax but with eyes bloodshot from rage, was Chloe. She must have come running. "What the hell is going on here?" Mitchell thundered. His gaze darted from David, sweaty and unraveled, to me, standing tall and cold in front of the desk, and to the brown envelope lying between us like a declaration of war. "James, this is not—" David began, but Mitchell cut him off with a wave of his hand. "I heard screaming from my office, and my daughter has told me some very concerning things." His gaze locked onto me. It was a gaze that must have made judges and adversaries tremble. "Eleanor, I am very sorry you had to resort to this. David, if you have done anything to harm this firm—" "I have not done anything!" David yelled, but his voice was a shriek of panic. "He is lying!" Chloe's voice, high-pitched and full of angry tears, cut the air. She pointed at David with a trembling finger. "You used me. You told me your marriage was a sham, that you were waiting for the right moment to leave her, that I was the love of your life, and it was all a lie. You are a coward and a liar." The spectacle was worthy of a soap opera, but I was not there for the drama. I was there for results. Mr. Mitchell, I said, addressing the senior partner with a calmness that contrasted brutally with the hysteria of the other two. I am sorry you have to witness this unpleasant scene, but as you can see, the personal situation of your partner is severely affecting the professional ethics and, I am afraid, the finances of this firm. I picked up the envelope and held it out to him. This is my divorce petition. In it, detailed with evidence, are the irregular transfers David has made from our joint accounts, largely destined, according to my investigations, to cover the costs of his relationship with your daughter. Apartments, jewelry, trips. Mitchell turned pale. He took the envelope as if it burned him. Is this true, David? His voice was now a dangerous rumble. James, she is exaggerating. It was to help her. Chloe had debts. Her father, no, do not use me as an excuse, you son of a bitch, Chloe screamed. Her tears of fury had stopped flowing. Now there was only a fierce, scorned hatred in her eyes. I spent my own money. Your money was to buy me, to keep me quiet. You are a piece of trash. David looked like a cornered animal, looking from one to the other, searching for an exit that did not exist. The facade of the successful lawyer, of the man of the world, had completely crumbled, exposing a petty, terrified creature. Enough, Mitchell said, and his authority filled the room. He looked at his daughter with a mix of disappointment and fury. Chloe, go to my office now. Then he turned to me. Eleanor, I am very sorry for what has happened. I give you my word that this matter will be handled with the utmost seriousness within the firm. We will not tolerate conduct that compromises our reputation. I hope so, I nodded, because if measures are not taken, I will be forced to make this information public, not just for my divorce, but for the sake of other women who might cross his path. I looked directly at David. My lawyer, Miss Vance, will contact yours. I hope you are more honest with him than you have been with me. I picked up my purse. The cycle was complete. I had planted the seed of doubt, of distrust, in the place that mattered most to David. His work, his prestige. James Mitchell would never look at him the same way again. And Chloe, the scorned mistress, would be his fiercest enemy within those very walls. As I walked out of the office, the silence in the bullpen was absolute. Every eye was glued to me. Some showed pity, others admiration. Most just pure morbid curiosity. I walked with my head held high, feeling the story spread like wildfire in my wake. Just as I reached the door, I heard his footsteps running down the hall. Wait, it was David. He had escaped from the office. His face was flushed, his eyes pleading. Eleanor, please. I am sorry. I am truly sorry. Tell me what I have to do. Whatever it is, do not destroy my life. I stopped. I turned around slowly. All the lawyers, assistants, secretaries held their breath. It was the final scene, and I had the script written. Your life, David, I said in a voice so clear everyone could hear it. You destroyed it yourself. The first time you lied to your wife. The second time you used our money to buy necklaces for someone else. The entire night you spent in a hotel while I waited for you in a parking garage. I did not do anything. I just got tired of waiting and walked away. The glass doors closed behind me, sealing off the scandal, the shame, the disaster I had left behind. On the sidewalk of the Magnificent Mile, the midday sun shone relentlessly. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of traffic, of coffee, of the city. It did not smell of lies. It did not smell of cheap cologne and guilt. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. Everything okay? Do you need me to come over? I smiled for the first time in a long time. A real smile. Tired, but clean. I texted back. All done. The show can start now. See you at home. Bring wine. The expensive kind. I looked up at the windows of the firm. Up there, high above. My old life was crumbling, and I, finally, was standing on the street, intact, breathing. The cold white wine tasted like victory. A sour, exhausting victory. But a victory nonetheless. Sarah and I were in the living room of my penthouse, shoes off, feet up on the coffee table. The late afternoon sunlight poured through the large windows, bathing the remnants of our old life in a warm glow. Now everything felt foreign to me. The throw pillows we had picked out together, the framed photo from our honeymoon in Maui, the designer vase that cost David an arm and a leg. They were all objects, relics of a shipwreck. I cannot believe you slapped him with the papers right in the middle of the firm, Sarah said, shaking her head with an admiring smile. You have more guts than a matador in the rain. I had no choice. I had to do it where it hurt the most, where it was real. If it had been at home, he would have found a way to turn it into another domestic argument, another misunderstanding. There, in front of his world, there was no escape. Well, James Mitchell is not going to forget that scene for the rest of his life. Neither is Chloe. What a nightmare that idiot has created for himself. She took a long sip. And now what? Comes the boring legal part. I hope so. That it is boring, fast, and that it gives me half of everything that is mine, which is a lot. I sighed, setting my glass on the table. The worst is over, right? Now everyone knows. There are no more secrets to keep. The doorbell rang, shrill and insistent. Sarah and I exchanged a look. Are you expecting someone? Better not be the press, Sarah joked, but she got up to look through the peephole. Her expression darkened instantly. It is Mom. A knot formed in my stomach. I was not ready for another battle, much less with her, but I knew it was inevitable. I opened the door. My mother, Mary, stood on the landing. She was wearing a light coat, even though it was not cold, clutching her purse tightly over her arm. Her face, normally serene and polished, was pale, her eyes a bit swollen, but she was not crying. She wore a determined expression, the same one she used when I was little, and she took me to the doctor for a shot. This hurts, but it is necessary. Mom, let me in, Eleanor. Her tone left no room for argument. I stepped aside. She walked in, saw Sarah, the glass of wine, the atmosphere of sadness mixed with celebration, and her mouth tightened even more. Sarah, I would like to speak with your sister alone. Whatever you have to say to me, you can say in front of her. I interjected before Sarah could move. There are no secrets here. Not anymore. My mother nodded bitterly. She sat on the edge of the sofa without taking off her coat, as if she did not plan on staying long. I spoke with David's mother. A heavy silence fell over the room. I imagine, I said, crossing my arms. She is devastated. She says you destroyed her son, that you humiliated him publicly, that you ruined his career, that I did exactly what he deserved. I interrupted, feeling the anger I thought was exhausted rising again. And what did you tell her, Mom? That her little boy is a saint? That I am hysterical? I told her I was very sorry. My mother looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something more than disapproval in her eyes. I saw fear. But I came here to talk about us, Eleanor, about this family. What you did today has stained our name. The whole city of Chicago will be talking. Sarah let out a dry laugh. For God's sake! Mom, now you are worried about what people will say? Her husband has been screwing his boss's daughter for almost a year. That does not stain a name. That does not give people something to talk about. That is settled behind closed doors. My mother exploded, hitting the arm of the sofa with her fist. You do not wash your dirty laundry in public. Never. You, Eleanor, broke the most important rule. You brought shame to our doorstep. I stepped closer. I stood right in front of her. There was no more distance, no more respect, no more patience. Just two women of the same blood facing each other across an abyss of misunderstanding. The shame was brought by David when he decided to cheat. You brought it when you told me to endure it, to close my eyes like you did. I have done nothing but open them. And look, Mom, look at all of it. Do you see anything worth saving here? This apartment, this sofa, this life of lies. Family is worth saving, she yelled, and suddenly furious, uncontrollable tears spilled out. Not being alone is worth saving. Not having to start over at 40 is worth saving. You do not know what awaits you, Eleanor. Loneliness is a cold, dark pit, and once you fall in, you never get out. Her scream, loaded with such ancient, deep anguish, chilled Sarah and me to the bone. It was not just my present we were discussing. It was her past. Her entire life. Why, Mom? I asked, and my voice cracked. Why did you endure it? For us? For what people would say? Or because you were afraid? She lowered her head. Her shoulders shook. When she spoke again, her voice was a hoarse, torn whisper. For everything. For you kids. For the house. To not disappoint my parents. For because that is what women of my generation did. We endured. Your father strayed once. Just once. With his secretary. A foolish girl in her 20s who thought he was going to leave me for her. She looked up, and her eyes were two wells of pain. When I found out, I wanted to kill him, and then I wanted to die. But then you were 10 years old, Sarah was 12, Paul was 8. What was I going to do? Break the family apart? Condemn you to grow up in a broken home, to be children of divorce? No, I could not. So I swallowed my pride, I swallowed my rage, and I forgave him. But forgiveness, daughter, forgiveness is not forgetting. It is having to look every day at the face of the man who broke your soul, and smiling at him. It is dying a little bit every day in silence so that others can live comfortably. And now your father looks at me, and I still see that man, and he looks at me and sees the woman who forgave him, but never absolved him. That is our life, Eleanor. Is that what you want? A life of shadows and silences. The weight of her confession fell on me like a slab of stone. Sarah had covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes full of tears. I felt the ground sinking beneath my feet. My entire childhood, all those moments of silent tension in the house, my father's absences, my mother's chronic sadness, all of it made a terrible, heartbreaking sense. No, Mom, I said, and my voice was soft now, full of a shared pain. That is not what I want. That is why I cannot do what you did. Because I admire you for your strength, for the sacrifice you made for us. But I do not want your life. I do not want your silence. I do not want to die a little bit every day. I prefer the loneliness you talk about. I prefer the cold pit, to rotting away inside a warm lie. She looked at me for a long time, the tears sliding down her wrinkled cheeks. Then, unexpectedly, her lips formed a small, sad smile. You are stronger than I am, Eleanor. You always were. And braver, she sighed. A sigh that seemed to come from deep within her bones. I told you to endure it because it was the only thing I knew how to do, because I thought I was sparing you pain. But I was only offering you mine, on an installment plan for the rest of your life. And I do not want that for you. She stood up with effort, slowly took off her coat, and folded it over the back of the sofa. A domestic, intimate gesture that meant she was staying, that she was putting down her weapons. You are right. He brought the shame. You only brought the truth, and the truth hurts, but at least it does not poison. She stepped closer to me and placed her hands on my shoulders. Her palms, rough and warm, transmitted a new, different kind of strength to me. Do what you have to do, daughter, and count on me. Not to tell you what to do, but to support you in whatever you decide. This house, she said, pointing around the penthouse with a dismissive gesture. These things are not your life. You are your life, and it is too valuable to waste on someone who does not know what he has. It was the greatest act of love my mother had shown me in years. Sarah walked over and hugged us both, and the three of us cried in the middle of the living room of my failed marriage. We cried for the pain, for the lost time, for the battles never fought, and for the one I was finally fighting. The peace did not last long. The next day, David's mother, Teresa, showed up at my door. She was not devastated or pleading. She came with the wounded dignity of a mother defending her cub, but also with the practical intelligence of a woman of her world. Eleanor, can we handle this another way? She said without bothering to sit down. A temporary separation, therapy. David is a wreck. He knows he has made a colossal mistake. It was not a mistake, Teresa. It was a choice. Hundreds of choices. Every day for months. And therapy does not cure a lack of respect or disloyalty. She nodded bitterly. He will give you whatever you ask for. The apartment, generous alimony, but do not ruin his career. If you go to court and contest this with those proofs you claim to have, he will not just lose everything with you, he will lose everything entirely. And you do not want that. He is the father of the children you could have. We do not have children. And thank God for that, I said, unfazed. And I do not want to ruin his career. I just want what is mine. And I want to be far away from him forever. Tell your son that if he signs the uncontested divorce settlement without complaining, his professional life might survive, even if he has to switch firms. That is my offer, the only one. Teresa looked at me, and in her eyes I saw that she understood, that she knew she had lost, that her boy no longer had any room to maneuver. She nodded once and left without another word. That night, like a predictable echo, came David's final attempt. It was not a call, it was him in person at 1 a.m, knocking softly on the door. I saw him through the peephole, haggard, with a 3-day beard, smelling of whiskey and desperation. I opened the door, but I kept the chain lock hooked. Eleanor, please, let me in. Let me explain. I have heard enough, David. There is nothing new you can say. I love you, he cried out, and his voice broke into a sob. I have realized that I love you. The thing with Chloe was stupid. A flight forward. I do not know, but you are my life. What we have, we cannot throw it in the trash. I looked at him through the crack in the door, at the man who once made me laugh, with whom I dreamed of a future, to whom I swore eternal love. I felt nothing anymore. Not rage, not hate, not love. Just a massive emptiness and a profound relief. No, David, I said with absolute calmness. You do not love me. What you love is the life you had. The comfortable, respectable life, with a wife who ironed your shirts and kept up appearances. What you want is for me to sweep your shame under the rug, like a good woman would do. But I am no longer that woman, and that life is over. You killed it. Can't we just try? He begged, resting his forehead against the wood of the door. No, because I do not love you anymore, and you cannot build anything on top of an empty hole. Go away, David. Talk to your lawyer. Sign the papers and leave me alone. It is the only decent thing you can do for me at the end. I closed the door. I heard him slide down the other side until he was sitting on the landing. I heard a choked, ugly sob. And then, after a while, I heard his footsteps walking away, slower and slower, until they disappeared. I leaned against the door on my side, the side of my new life. Empty, uncertain, but clean. For the first time in a very, very long time, I felt at peace. The last tie, the tie of a dead love, had broken. Only paper, ink, and the law remained. And I was ready. The courthouse smelled of polished wood, fear, and bureaucracy, a stale scent that had not changed in decades. I, Eleanor, was sitting on a hard bench in the courtroom, flanked by Valerie Vance, whose presence beside me was as solid and reassuring as a battleship. Across from us, at the other table, sat David and his lawyer, a man with a tired expression who had not stopped whispering to his client in obvious frustration. David barely looked at me. He looked thinner, consumed. He was wearing an expensive suit, but it hung loose on him. His elegance had become a cheap imitation of itself. I, on the other hand, wore a simple navy blue dress. It was not the costume of a victim or an avenger. It was the uniform of someone who had come to close a deal. Your Honor, David's lawyer, began when the judge, a middle-aged woman with thin-rimmed glasses, called for opening statements. My client wishes to express his profound regret for the mistakes made, which in no way were intended to diminish the respect he holds for Mrs. Miller. However, we consider the proposed division of assets presented by the plaintiff to be excessive. It does not reflect the spirit of cooperation my client has shown, nor does it take into account his current professional situation, which has considerably deteriorated following these unfortunate events. Valerie leaned slightly toward the microphone. Her voice was clear, serene, without an ounce of emotion. Your Honor, my client is not here to evaluate regret, but to assert her rights. The defendant's spirit of cooperation was limited to being caught red-handed after months of deception and diverting joint funds. The proposal is fair, and regarding his professional situation, it stems from his own actions, not my client's. Actions, which, by the way, we have documented. The judge leafed through the thick file. I see the plaintiff has submitted an extensive evidentiary dossier. Any objections to its validity, counselor? David's lawyer swallowed hard. Your Honor, some of that evidence may have been obtained in a pliant, all obtained legally and in full compliance with privacy laws, Valerie cut in, sliding a copy of the investigator's reports and the certified bank statements toward the judge's bench. Photographs, professional surveillance reports, joint account statements, showing recurring transfers to third-party accounts, and even a recording of a conversation in which the third party, Chloe Mitchell, acknowledges the relationship. No illegal wiretaps, just facts. David turned even paler hearing Chloe's name. His lawyer muttered something, but nodded in resignation. The judge examined the photos. One of them particularly clear, David and Chloe walking into the hotel. Then she moved on to the bank statements, where the transfers to an account in Chloe Mitchell's name stood out with shameful regularity. Mr. Miller, the judge said, looking up. Do you recognize these transfers? David opened his mouth, but only a croak came out. Finally, he nodded. Yes, Your Honor, but they were loans to help her. Loans without a contract, without interest, and with no intention of repayment. As noted in the text messages that are also in the file, Valerie pointed out without flinching. and which came from an account funded by the couple's joint savings. The legal battle was brief and brutal. David tried, in a final fit of desperation, to argue that the apartment in Chicago was largely the fruit of his labor, and that I should settle for less. Valerie then deployed her final papers. The contracts from my work as an interior designer, my pay stubs, the bills proving that I had contributed to the mortgage and common expenses as much as or more than him for years, especially in the beginning when he was just an associate. My client sacrificed professional opportunities to support her husband's career. Your Honor, Valerie said, and her tone, for the first time, held a trace of contained emotion. She built a home, and that home was betrayed. All she is asking for now is her rightful share. Not a penny more, not a penny less. The judge deliberated briefly, consulting her notes. The courtroom sat in an oppressive silence. I looked at my hands clasped in my lap. I did not feel triumph, only an immense exhaustion and a deep yearning for this to be over. Having reviewed the background and the evidence provided, the judge finally declared, and finding no cause that justifies a disproportion, I deem the settlement agreement proposed by Mrs. Eleanor Miller to be fair and in accordance with the law, approved under the requested terms. A 50-50 division of assets. Spousal support, given the current income disparity, in favor of Mrs. Miller, as requested. Custody of the shared pet, a cat named Hemingway, to Mrs. Miller. She closed the folder with a sharp thud. I wish both parties find the peace they undoubtedly seek. Case closed. A strike of the gavel and it was over. 7 years of my life reduced to a few minutes of legal jargon and a division of property. Valerie squeezed my arm, smiling with professional satisfaction. Across the aisle, David's lawyer spoke to him in a low voice, gathering his things. David did not move. He stared at me with bloodshot eyes, a mix of disbelief and hatred. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the cool, quiet hallway, I took a deep breath. Valerie handed me a certified copy of the decree. It is done, Eleanor. You are free and in a good position. You won. I did not win anything that was not already mine, I said, putting the document in my purse. But thank you, Valerie, for everything. As I walked out of the courthouse building, David caught up with me on the steps. The mid-morning sun was blinding. Eleanor, wait, please. I stopped. I did not say anything. So this is how it all ends, with splitting bank accounts and a cat. His voice was harsh, broken. It ended months ago, David. In a parking garage. Today was just the paperwork. He lowered his head. I do not hate you. You know? Even though you hate me. No, I said, surprised by the truth of my own words. I do not hate you. Hate requires energy, and I have already spent all I had on you. What I feel is nothing. You are a stranger, and I want you to stay that way. For the first time, I saw how that indifference, harder than any insult, hit him harder than the judge's ruling. He stumbled slightly. I truly loved you. Maybe. But it was not enough. And I no longer love you. It is that simple. That sad. Goodbye, David. I walked down the steps without turning my head. I did not hear his footsteps. I did not hear anything else. Just the noise of the city. Immense. Indifferent. Continuing to spin. My old life was left behind in that dark room, and I was walking, one step after another, toward whatever came next. 1 year later, the space smelled of fresh paint, white lilies, and champagne bubbles. Sisters, read the elegant neon sign on the exposed brick wall. Beneath it, Sarah and I, in our best dresses, welcomed friends, family, and clients. It was the grand opening of our interior design studio. My half of the settlement, plus a small loan, had gone toward this. A modest but charming storefront in the Wicker Park neighborhood, new computers, fabric swatches, and a massive sofa where clients could sit and dream up their homes. Real homes, not window displays. People filled the space. My parents were there. My mother, Mary, held a glass of champagne and chatted animatedly with a former client of mine. She looked at me and winked. There was something new about her. A lightness. As if by supporting me unconditionally, she had begun to forgive herself. My father, Edward, stood beside her, quiet, but with his hand resting on her back. A small, timid gesture that perhaps was the beginning of something different, or maybe just the truce of two war veterans. My friends from work, my old college roommates, even some clients who had followed me, they were all there. There was no trace of pity in their eyes, only curiosity, admiration, and genuine joy. Are you nervous? Sarah asked, stepping up beside me with the champagne bottle to refill my glass. A little, but it is a good nervous. The nervousness of someone unveiling something of her own. Entirely her own. She nodded, clinking her glass against mine. Then Sarah tapped a spoon against her glass to get everyone's attention. The chatter died down. All right. Thank you everyone for coming. For those who do not know, this is a dream my little sister and I have had for years. And look, sometimes the endings that seem catastrophic are just the beginnings we needed. She looked at me with shining eyes. Eleanor is not just the best designer I know, she is the bravest person. And today I toast to her, to us, and to all new beginnings. Cheers. Cheers. The crowd echoed, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the room. In that moment, through the crowd, I spotted Mike Roberts, the private investigator. He was standing near the door with a beer in his hand, observing the scene with an almost imperceptible smile. Our eyes met. He gave a slight nod, a greeting from a professional to a satisfied client, or perhaps from one person to another who had made it out of a dark tunnel. I nodded back. He turned around and disappeared into the crowd, his job done, his discreet but indelible mark left on my life. Later, as the party was winding down, I stepped out the front door of the studio. The Chicago night was warm, full of life. In the pocket of my dress, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it cautiously. It is Chloe. I know you do not have to reply. I just wanted to tell you I moved to New York and that you were right. It was not love, it was something else, and it cost me dearly. I hope you are doing well, and that you win a lot of projects. Goodbye. I read it twice. Then I deleted the message. It was not out of spite. It was just that her chapter, and David's, belonged to a book I had already closed. I did not need epilogues from its characters. Sarah stepped outside and leaned against the doorframe next to me. Everything good? Yes, I said. And it was true. Everything was good. I looked up. Between the Wicker Park buildings, you could catch a glimpse of a starry sky. It was not a dawn like that one in the hotel parking garage. It was a full, serene night. A conquered night. I had lost a marriage. I had gained a stronger sisterhood, a trait I loved, a piece of peace, and the hard, wonderful right to write my own story. Without lies, without compromises, without anyone by my side who did not want to be there for me, and only for me. Come on, Sarah said, tugging gently on my arm. There is still champagne left, and our first client is tomorrow at 9. Life goes on, sis. I followed her inside to the warmth of the people who loved me, to the glow of the neon lights of our very own business. Life indeed went on, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I was so eager to live it.